Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. And it's not that far off, and we'll be heading the kids back to school, or I should say the kids will be heading back to school. I don't have children, but I have to say, even as someone who doesn't have kids, there is a certain feeling or a certain vibe about this time of year, whether you see like back to school sales or just remembering from my own childhood that there's just a feel with this kind of time of year, the part of the season. Now, also, of course, my birthday's in September, and it's right around that time we go back to school. So I think I will never lose that feeling. So today's conversation is going to be somewhat related to school, but I also like to say at the beginning, as you know, if you listen, you hear me say, and I think this is important, how I know my guest or how I came to be introduced to them, because I always say I think it's important for us to be curious, for us to be involved in our communities, to get to know people, to see how we can help them, and they might end up helping us in return. I just think that's so important. I think community and connection are especially important in the world we live in today, and especially since the pandemic. So my guest this week was actually initially someone that a former guest had suggested. So if you recall, I had Nina Judge on. It's probably been, oh gosh, over a year. Maybe it's going on a year and a half, almost 2 years that Nina was on, and she spoke about her foundation, the John Malvisi Foundation, named after her father who died by suicide. And she was just, she had heard my podcast and connected with it, reached out to me. And I said, hey, I'd love to have you on. And then she reached out and was like, I have a couple women that I think are just fantastic what they do. And, if they're willing and interested in talking to you, I think they'd be great guests. So Nina had suggested my guest this week, Katona Miller. And Katona and I spoke a little bit through email, like really briefly, and it just didn't connect. But again, being out in the community, I ran into Katona in May. It was the Women in Philanthropy event where they give out funding for very worthy, wonderful projects throughout the community. And I have spoken about women in philanthropy before. I've had Laura Duchesky on before, the executive director of the Scranton Area Community Foundation. Women in Philanthropy does wonderful things in the region. And they were awarding money that evening. And Katona was there with 3 of her STEM students. And they were so impressive, these young women. They not only spoke, but they asked questions of the other speakers. I was blown away with how mature and how wonderful they were. And I think it's a great experience. So with that intro, I will introduce my guest this week is Katona Miller. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Nina did suggest you, and I think we, you were busy, and like we had a couple, like an email or two back and forth. So sometimes I believe in signs, and I'm thinking, I saw you there in May, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to go over to her so we can connect now. But before we get into that and the whole program and all of that, I do like my listeners to get to know just a little bit about the women I have on as guests. So, and I jokingly told you before I hit the record button, you could take as long as you want or keep it short if you want to just share a little bit about yourself.
I'm actually from Scranton. I grew up here. I went through the Scranton School District, through West Intermediate and West High School, and I went on to college to Shippensburg University for my undergrad. I originally started my career off with wanting to be a chemical analysis. That changed very quickly. And so I started in Berwick. I was there, I believe, 4 years. And then I moved to the Scranton School District. The only reason I left Berwick is honestly, it was the drive. I was living
Mm.
in Scranton at the time and commuting the hour and 15 minutes each way. And I just didn't feel I could be as involved because I always had to leave by a certain time to get home. And there were many times I had to stay down there because of snow and I couldn't get back. And so while I loved it down there, I did transfer when I had the opportunity to teach in the Scranton School District. Um, from there, I worked at South Intermediate School for about 10 years. During my first year at South, I actually started on my master's degree in science education through Penn State, got that degree. Then, towards the end of my tenure at South Intermediate School, I had actually started earning my certification in computer science. So I was originally certified in Earth and Space Science 7 to 12, General Science 7 to 12, Environmental Science K-12, and then I added the Computer Science 712. Um, I completed that certification. I saw a posting that the Scranton School District was looking at starting a STEM academy and was looking for a supervisor. And so I took the gamble, applied, got that position, switched over, and began the planning process for opening a 7 to 12 STEM academy here in the district. And so for the last 5 years, that's kind of where I've been working. And um, I don't know.
Okay,
Since then,
that's a good point. I was going
actually,
to say, go ahead. I was going to say, don't worry, you don't have to keep talking if you're running out of gas there. Go ahead.
well, the last thing that I did is I do believe in continuing to further your education. And so while I took a supervisory role, it's a central administration role. So I did start taking administrative classes, and I actually just a few months ago earned my administrative and principal certification as well. So I have that now. So.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
and then
quite a
I
bit.
actually, about 2 weeks ago, Patan, the Pennsylvania Teacher Assistant and Training Network, signed me on as a computer science mentor for teachers looking to earn their computer science certification in the state of Pennsylvania. So I will also be doing that this year.
Wow. Well, I applaud you on all of that. And I do agree that I think we should all be, and it can look different for everybody. I'm not saying we should all be doing the same thing, but like always wanting to learn more and continuing education, no matter what it is, even if it's just to fulfill curiosity. That's fantastic. I have a lot of questions. I first want to go back, and this you said early on. What exactly would have been, you said you were originally interested in chemical analysis. What would that be?
So there's a bunch of different jobs in that field that basically deal with either an unknown substance that has to be broken down and analyzed to figure out what it is, or taking a compound and trying to replicate it by breaking it down and figuring out what's inside. But it's essentially just the breakdown and analysis of a substance of some kind and mapping out what it's made of. And I thought that's what I wanted to do, and then I took my first class and I was like, oh, this is not it.
Okay. All right. And is that something that would be used like in the environment, like if there was a chemical spill, or is that more pharmaceutical?
It could be anything actually. So both. There's a
Okay.
lot of governmental CSI also works a lot with that. So many different fields take on chemical
Okay.
analysis.
Wow, that's interesting just because you don't hear that so much. And then you went to geology, you said, right? So that's something too that I don't run into a lot of people who have that interest. And you did, so you ended up getting your degree in geology?
So I ended up getting my degree in Earth and Space Science
Okay.
in education.
Okay.
So my specialty was geology. My master's degree focused on aseismic transients. So I studied fault lines for what they call slow slow earthquakes, I guess would be the best way to put it. It's a type of plate movement that takes about like 30 to 45 days
Hmm.
versus like an earthquake that happens in one day, or plate motion that happens, over millions of years.
Wow. Wow, that you don't run into people who have that knowledge very often. So that's interesting. Wow. And then so you know a lot about a lot of different areas, obviously. What is it that it was it just your natural instinct or curiosity to keep learning that shifted you to the computer degree, or did you just think, okay, this is the way of the future and I want to head in that direction?
So I always did in my classroom little like expansion topics. So I would bridge interests for students. So like for instance, like when Fortnite became like the biggest thing out,
Mm.
all of my projectile motion and vector lessons dealt with Fortnite maps just to keep the kids kind of engaged and interested. And I myself became like a big, I don't want to say gamer, but I always enjoyed that aspect of it. And um, a group of kids were interested in like the hour of code and different things. And so I would add those in to my class. And so when I saw that PA was going to be releasing the computer science certification, it just became like something that I started incorporating in my class and kind of kept expanding on. And it just became an interest of mine to learn more about it.
That makes sense. I love that you're using something that will keep them engaged, because I think that's probably one of the biggest issues with kids losing interest or, being bored. Although truthfully, unfortunately, I think unfortunately they're young people. The culture is so like stimulated with everything online. It's a little bit challenging, but I do love that you're reaching them on their level and meeting them where they're at, because there are probably a lot of people, and you hear both sides about about computer games or video games. And yes, to some degree, you could say, okay, you don't want them on the screen or, so much screen time. But on the other hand, they could be learning, even maybe without even realizing it, a lot of different skills and skill sets while they're playing those games.
Yes, and that's also one of the proponents. I've been an advocate of esports
Mm-hmm.
for fostering like team engagement. And there's a lot of students that aren't going to go out for like your traditional sports for whatever reason. And esports kind of gives them that bit of a community. I know I had found mine with several clans over the years that I had joined just in my own personal life. And so that is something that will be also expanding in the Scranton School District at both high schools this year.
And that's something, if I'm not mistaken, I feel like, is it Lackawanna College who has that? And maybe a couple of colleges are
I
offering
believe,
esports.
yeah, there's actually quite a few now. Lackawanna College, I think, was one of the first. I know Marywood University has it. I'm not too sure about many of the others, just because I've worked closely with Lackawanna College and I've spoken with a couple people at Marywood, so I do know they both have programs. But I'm almost positive a lot of colleges are moving towards that, and I know Lackawanna College, if it was, it might have been 2 years ago, they were promoting the fact they had two or three students that received full scholarships to be on the team and get their education and participate in some of their tournaments. And they even invite some of our students out to see the college and the campus and get involved with their esports group.
That's really awesome. And for people who don't know, and I'll admit I don't fully understand. So is esports, it's not, is it playing sports online, or is it like understanding like the promotion of it? What exactly do the kids do?
So the esports can be a sports game like Madden. Um, Rocket League is a big one, and that's kind of like soccer, but with cars on the screen. But then there are games like Valorant, and Call of Duty, which are, your first person shooter games. And then there's games like Apex Legends, which is a computer-based game, and it kind of has this whole map and there's different roles and each team takes something and it's more of a strategy type game where you have to like take over a tower and stuff. So there's a wide variety of games and teams. So each college and group or network kind of picks out which games they're going to compete in. So like Lackawanna College, I know has Valorant and Rocket League and Apex Legends and a couple other games that they support teams in.
Mm-hmm. And a student who would be involved in this, what's the hope outside of like in a professional setting, like the value? What would they be looking to do?
So, I, a lot of students who join in, they want to be a professional gamer.
Mm,
But a lot of them begin taking courses, usually in computer science, social media, production, broadcasting. Some will go into like the graphic design nature of the elements of creation, whether that ends them up in the gaming industry or not. They start in that type of field. Some of them go through the social promotion. There's something called like a shoutcasting station where the person is on there, basically giving the commentary throughout the game and getting people engaged. And so they learn that side of it as well. But a lot of it comes down to managing a team, working together, learning to communicate because it's something that's live, happening instantaneously, and you have to be able to communicate and get your team coordinated. And so a lot of those skills get built out for any profession, really.
yeah, as you're saying that, and it's, I mean, and hopefully the kids see that, because I taught briefly at King's College for 7 years in the communications department. Teaching is not my passion. It was not exactly for me, but it was fine. But a lot of the especially the male students, a lot of them in communications would want to be like sportscasters, right? Sports announcers, and they'd all like, yeah, they're going to start at ESPN. And I'm not mocking, but it's like you have to be willing to take all kinds of jobs, and you don't just start right at ESPN. But as you're talking, I'm thinking of things that I would tell them too, where it's like if you learn the basics of things, you can apply them to any industry, like learn how to write properly, learn how to speak well or be engaging, that sort of thing. And you can apply that anywhere. So when you were saying that, it sounds like those types of skills, especially strategizing, teamwork, that can really be applied to any industry, the business world or anything. And they could probably easily shift using those skills. I think that sounds very valuable.
Yeah, and that's one of the big aspects I push with the STEM Academy is introducing students to all the different jobs and opportunities, especially ones in like what I call our own backyard or in our area, to students. And the example that I always use is when students come in who are interested in the medical track, I hear nurse and doctor. I don't usually
Mm-hmm.
hear like surgical technician or radiologist or any of the other professions that go along with medicine. They just kind of know nurse and doctor. And so we try to like open up their opportunities and kind of let them explore a wide range of medical professions that are out there that they may not even be aware of. Because I mean, how do you know what you're interested in if you don't know what's out there? I mean, I'll be honest, the whole reason I wanted to go into chemical analogy was because when I was in high school, my high school chemistry teacher had someone come in from DuPont and talked about chemical analysis and his job. And so I was like, all right, I like chemistry. I'm going to be a chemical analyst. Like that was just like kind of the connection that I made. And so, yeah, it's something I try to expose the students to as much as possible.
That's incredible, honestly. Now I won't go down on when I was a kid, we walked both ways uphill, but I'm a Gen Xer. So like, we were real limited. I'm not as limited as my parents' generation where it's like women become teachers, but even as a Gen Xer, like we weren't exposed to all this. So I think it's wonderful. And to your point, you had a speaker. And so that gave you ideas of like, oh, maybe I want to be that. So I think that just raises the point or illustrates or highlights that it is so important to expose kids to different things, the guest speakers, the, like you said, taking them to Lackawanna College or letting them, kind of see the other students in the esports. All that exposure is so important because I think it's almost just as valuable too to learn what they don't want, because you might have this idea, oh, I want to go into this field. And then you spend, a day or two shadowing and you're like, oh, I don't think that's really what I want because I didn't think it was like that. But it's important because it helps them, get better clarification, I guess, on what they could be doing or what they might want to do in their future.
Yeah, and so we work closely with the local colleges. We had students at a ology STEM camp up at Keystone this summer. We have kids that work with LACOAC and the Lackawanna River Conservation Association. And we've taken kids to Penn State to see their engineering campus that's in Scranton. Um, We've connected students with Marywood University and Lackawanna, the Geisinger Medical College. We have students go there every month for mentorship and a program there that they start in seventh grade and continue through high school. And then even on their own through their graduate classes and stuff. So we like to keep them out in the community. We even had students, I took them up to Toby Hanna Army Depot so they could see some of the jobs and opportunities that are up there. Through Johnson College's Girls in Fire event, we take them up there so the girls can see all the different careers up there and the CTC and a whole bunch of varieties that are, local that are right here that the students can take advantage of.
Yeah, I think that's key. And I love to see all these different collaborations. I think Johnson College, I had Katie Leonard, the president, on the podcast a couple times. And I think they're doing great. I mean, that's something like to go back to harken back to in my day, it was like, oh, if you were smart, and by smart, I mean, the basic, oh, you achieve certain grades, you do this. And they didn't really talk about the trades, or if they did talk about the trades, it was in a way of, oh, that's here, and gosh, I wish they did talk about them more because boy, I wouldn't mind being a welder. I think they make a really good living, but I'm too lazy to go back, or I probably my mindset couldn't work too well with that. But I love that exposure and the collaboration because I feel like they're doing a much better job, and even with young girls or young women, bringing them in and saying you can be all of these different things. And I think they've come so far, and the community collaborations with the younger students, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and that's something I think they do a really great job with. I mean, my fiance, well, I shouldn't say fiance, I got married. My husband, I'm still not used to
Congratulations.
saying it. Thanks, yeah, 2 weeks in. But my husband actually graduated from Johnson College as an electrician and then went to Toby Hannon. So those were some of my ins with those two organizations. But even the Luzerne County Community College, while far away, now has a campus opening at the Steamtown Mall. And so there's a lot of connections out there for students that they're not even aware of that we try to kind of bring and expose them to and give them as many opportunities as possible.
Yeah, and this I want to move on, but my last point about those, I just want to say I applaud. I think they're doing a great job as things are changing in the world. I feel like sometimes the 4-year colleges, I feel like some of them may not be as adapting as quickly. I feel like Lackawanna College, Luzerne County Community College, I think they've done fantastic with offering different kinds of programs and trying to meet people where they're at as far as like adult learners. I applaud them on all the different ways that they're staying relevant and trying to meet people's needs today. I think they're doing wonderful around here. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And those accelerated programs and certificate programs that like Lackawanna, Luzerne, even Johnson College that they offer, they have those internships, they get the kids right in there, they get them working in those fields, they have partnerships. Like I believe it's Johnson College has a partnership with General Dynamics for CAD design. And so a lot of our students here who are learning like the basics of CAD, computer aided design, um, can begin looking at Johnson College if they want to do like a 9 month to 1 year type certification program and then get, hired into General Dynamics and stuff. And so a lot of those express programs are really nice because it gives them that real world application and then that internship, which I think is really vital, that helps them get them into different places and hopefully start cementing a career and a future for them. And the nice thing too, I was just recently at Johnson College and they had their whole veterinary science building. And when you first walk in, it looks like you're walking into a vet. But then when you walk into like the patient room, you're opening the door and it's a classroom. And so like it gets this whole feel like you're actually in the environment, which is real nice.
Yeah, that's really great. I want to talk to you about because I want to learn and I want my listeners to understand what's happening there in Scranton, the STEM Academy. And I'll admit a little confusion because I know one of my neighbors, I think one of her sons attends the STEM Academy. And I'm like, well, is it a different school? Like, I don't even understand exactly what it is. And I'd love to hear all about it from you.
Yeah. So the Scranton School District STEM Academy is a 7 through 12 program inside of Scranton High School. So think of it kind of like a school within a school. So Scranton High is a 7 to 12 building. And so our seventh and eighth graders who come in, they start their education at one of our middle schools at either Southwest or Northeast in grade 5. We also take students from non-pub schools, so schools like All Saints or Howard Gardner, Nativity McGill, St. Clair, St. Paul, or just to name a few. But the students in sixth grade can apply for our application process to get in seventh grade to our program. Um, while I wish I can accept everyone, our space is limited and we can only take about 60 students each year in seventh grade. And then we have a wait list that we pull from for like, say a student moves in like seventh or eighth grade throughout the year or something, we can pull in a student from the wait list. And so in seventh and eighth grade, they're kind of kept within our wing of the building. They have all of their classes here. So this kind of becomes their school. And they take their English and their history and their science classes here. But then they also take STEM and computer science and engineering and medicine. And so they take a variety of classes geared towards one of those three pathways of either computer science, medicine, or engineering. Once they get to ninth grade, they get to kind of pick their pathway. And the pathways are flexible. So if you have someone who's interested in, say, like biomedical engineering, they may take 2 years of engineering, 2 years of medicine to get some of those foundational courses down before moving on to like a higher degree or certificate program. And so in ninth grade, they get integrated into the high school. And so their specials and their STEM courses take place still inside the academy, but their history, their math, all of those would take place out in the high school. And that gives them the opportunity to still take all of the different AP courses and honors classes that the high school has the ability to provide, that the STEM Academy just doesn't have the room or the personnel to provide them. And so it kind of gives them that expansion and career focus to one of those three pathways.
That sounds great. Now, um, so now when you're saying, and I just want to clarify, so if there's students who are like in a Catholic school or a private school, so they can actually apply for the program.
Yeah,
Okay.
you have the guidelines are you have to live within the city of Scranton. So if you live within the
Okay.
city of Scranton, you can apply for entry into the STEM Academy. And one of the things as part of the application process, I mean, we look at some of your classic stuff, your grades, your attendance, discipline, but paired equally with, say, like your grades or your state, like PSSA scores, equally weighted to that is a project-based assessment. And so what that is the students come in, it's a topic they've never seen or heard of before. They get a short little lesson on it. And then it's kind of like an open-ended project that they have to work on as a group to collect like data. That first part is not graded. That's just data collection. Afterwards, we then split them kind of state testing style, and they're given like an analysis, and they have to do something with the data, break it down, and try to explain to me what it is they did, why they did it, what went wrong, what they did when something went wrong. And that helps because while I was a good student, I wouldn't say I was like immaculate or great or anything. But what I was really good at was, for instance, like breaking stuff down, taking it apart, much to my own mother's dismay. But I would, I took something apart and, it may not have gotten back that night. I may have been grounded for the entire week while I was trying to put it back together, but I didn't give up. I had that tenacity to kind of stay with it and that grit
Mm.
to, in the face of failure, just keep trying and trying until eventually you get it. And so that's a quality I think a lot of our students outside of academics have. And so finding that student that's kind of the right fit for the academy that has that ability to, in the face of failure, just keep trying and look for alternative ways and work collaboratively. And there's no one right answer. There's a variety of answers based on how you want to frame your results. And so that's kind of what the project-based assessment hopes to kind of gather information on with the students. And one of the reasons why we pair it equally weighted with grades.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love what you're saying, and I wish all academia or all schools had this kind of thoughtfulness. Because I mean, just hearing you use the word grit, as we know, not just with kids, but even like with every age person, adults, grit is such an important skill, if you want to call it a skill or an asset to have in life to keep going. And I'm hearing ingenuity, innovation. They're trying to find different ways to do things, not just, oh, that didn't work, let's try something else. And then the teamwork, like that, those are just such valuable things to be learning and practicing.
Oh, definitely. And one of our biggest after school clubs is our PJS, Pennsylvania Junior Academy of Science. And I will say I am biased. I'm the Region 2 Technology Chair for the organization. So I help with the whole region of, well, it's a variety of counties, most of Lackawanna County, but there's, I think, like 50 some school districts that I coordinate with. But students in that club design like an experiment project, computer science investigation, math investigation around something that interests them. So, I mean, it can be a wide stance of I had someone to see if you could actually train cockroaches, because if you could train them, then maybe you can trap and kill them better in your house. So I had cockroaches running through mazes. I've had students who wanted to see, you know, is cocoa powder a better dry shampoo than actual dry shampoos that you can buy in a store? And everything from the deflate gate, and like, does deflating a football actually help throw it further distances? And so the students all pick anything that kind of interests them. It doesn't have to be something they're studying in school. It just can't harm a human or an animal. Those are kind of like the guidelines. But They pick a project that they're interested in. They spend kind of the whole year really diving deep into it. They design a presentation, they do all their experiments and their investigations and look up all their background knowledge, and they really become an expert in that one thing. And they prepare a 10-minute presentation that they then take to Wilkes University for our regional competition. And they present to a panel of judges who are other teachers and sponsors across like the district, college students, college professors, people in industry. And if they do well, they move on to the state level where they get to expand and work on their project more. But it gives them a lot of skills. It's amazing to see a student who's participated to a student who hasn't, and their public speaking skills, their how comfortable they are in front of people and kind of taking the lead in charge of a group in different projects. And so that's a great club and organization that we really promote here. And we have, I want to say, probably 50 or 60 of our 120 seventh and eighth graders participate in the program. And so like we have a huge group that goes. And so we're really proud of them for that.
That's fantastic. So I had a chuckle because one of my good friends who moved back to the state from North Carolina, they're right now until they get home, they're in an apartment and it's a beautiful apartment, but he mentioned having a cockroach. So I'm like, oh, what did your kids learn about that? Can you teach the cockroach to hit the road or what?
So it was after a few weeks, she was showing progress in the cockroaches being able to know which ways to turn in the maze. Um, Unfortunately, we then had a huge snowstorm that year, and we ended up being out of school for several days before Christmas break, and then Christmas break happened, and so when she came back, the cockroaches kind of all forgot. At that point, she kind of didn't have enough time at that point to kind of start over retraining them. But she was showing evidence that it would, in fact, work and that you can train them with. And I think she was using Fruit Loops or something.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. That's interesting. Now, do other school districts have programs comparable to what you guys have, or are they just kind of maybe on a smaller scale?
So I think we're a bit unique in the fact that we have a program that starts in seventh grade. I know Hazleton has a STEM academy that starts in ninth grade. It is a separate building, it's its own school, but they have a similar uh, application process for getting into their academy. And I know Wilkes has one now as well that kind of graduated. That again, that's high school. So I think we are unique in the fact that we start as early as seventh grade,
Mm.
but there are a variety of school districts that have STEM pathway or STEM courses that they offer, and it may not just be something that's kind of called out specifically as a STEM academy, but do have some offerings. But I think we're unique in that front that we have it starting as early as seventh grade, as well as offering having that big focus on medicine. And that had to do a lot with our area and, the number of, the medical college and the number of hospitals and nursing homes and different medical professions that are centered here in the city of Scranton.
And that makes sense. Yeah. So you mentioned something too I want to follow up on because it connects to what I said before about seeing you in May. You mentioned how the students, the ones with the like better communication skills that get out and they have to like present, and that is so valuable. And I think it's so interesting. I think of the Seinfeld episode, the joke he makes about like it's, people are more afraid of public speaking than death. And I think young kids are, I feel like it's changing, or and maybe not for every kid because there's certainly shy kids, but I'm so impressed when I see young people speaking, because that's certainly nothing I did until like maybe a little bit in high school, but more in college. But the night that I saw you at the Women in Philanthropy, you had three young women with you, and you could tell me if they were, I believe they're STEM students. I love, first of all, the fact that more young women are getting into this, because I do think that's so key for them to see role models like yourself. But those young women were they spoke at the podium and then they asked questions. I was just so impressed by them. So I think that was great. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so they are all my STEM Academy students. They were all eighth graders. And they actually, while one of them participates in PJS, the three of them all competed and participated in a Girls in STEM program that Marissa Barlicka started when she was at Abington School District. She's now at Valley View. She would be a great plug for you. Uh, but she does a girls in STEM competition, and it's to promote women in STEM and teamwork and collaboration. And a lot of the projects and different things are in fields that you really wouldn't think have STEM components to them. And so like design and fashion and there was one year she did something with like baking and display designs and different things. And so they all participated in that. Unfortunately, the way it's geared, it doesn't really take off until about January. It's over by March, so it's a very short term project. And so one of the reasons I reached out to the Women in Philanthropy was wanting to expand it because some of those girls I noticed over the past 2 years, they not only stay for the preparation of that project and all of like their designs and stuff, but the creativity side of it, where they get to kind of paint and add their vinyl and work with the machines and kind of like that creative side really got them working together and working long hours. There were days I came into school early and there's already a couple of the girls here working on stuff. Or, I'd be like trying to kick them out, being like, guys, I have to go home. Maintenance also would like to go home.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was something that, I looked to expand. And so I was fortunate enough, I brought the girls, because they were the ones who, wanted to keep going and wanted to do more. And so I brought them with me. When they heard about it, I had so many that wanted to go, and I had to like kind of be like, guys, we can't overwhelm them. But I got the three girls to, come and present, and they were thrilled with the opportunity to be able to expand it. And so, yeah, that was kind of where that kind of came from. And I mean, they are each unique and different in their own way with their pathways and what they want to choose. I know one is looking at engineering. I think the other two are looking at medicine. Well, the one's kind of undecided, but leaning towards medicine as a career choice. But they all kind of came together. They weren't all necessarily friends to begin with. They kind of just, grouped together, had different skill sets, and it worked out nice. And now they kind of have that little friend group moving forward as well as like a support system as they continue through the program.
Yeah, that's great. And how long have you had the STEM Academy itself? How many years has that been going on at Scranton, the school district?
So this is going to be our 4th year.
Okay, the fourth year. Okay, because I was going to ask you, and maybe it's too soon, if you've noticed anything as far as the statistics, or excuse me, not statistics, but the data of like young women versus young men attending it, and if you're seeing a change. I mean, I feel like it's definitely on the uptick over the past several years, but maybe you haven't noticed too much in 4 years there.
So what I can tell you is, so our first year, we only had 7th and 8th grade students. So then our second year, those 8th graders move up to 9th grade. So we were 7 to 9. Last year, we were 7 to 10. This year, we're going to be 7 to 11. Next year, we'll be 7 to 12, and we'll be fully mapped out in our full program. So we've been continually expanding. So I only have 3 years worth of data on my seventh
Mm.
and 8th grade. I only have 1 year of data, say, on my 10th graders. So, and I have no years of data on my 11th graders yet. So it's hard to kind of give an idea. What I can tell you is from our application process, um, students who apply and students who get in, it's been pretty close to 50-50.
Hmm.
Not perfectly male female, but pretty close. I am running data on high school because they see generally a drop in female participation in STEM fields. And so that's something that I'm hoping to combat with this program and keep up those supports and those, like, for instance, expanding Girls in STEM to being like an all-year program, like to keep them involved and engaged. So that we don't see that drop off in high school, because I believe by the time they get to college, women usually only represent less than 10%.
Mm.
So that is something that I am tracking, but I really don't have any data,
Yeah,
good
no,
data
that's okay.
anyway yet at this point.
Yeah,
But that
that's
is
fair.
something that I do track and
Hmm.
have been tracking and will continue to track.
Is there anything, and only because that you're in it, so you probably hear more and read a lot of things about it. Is it just that there's not enough programs in place, or is it more of a, and I hate to say like a hormonal thing where it's like they shift with their friend groups and their what, that why the young girls suddenly are no longer interested in STEM?
I think it's a mix of different things. I think um, by default, girls become interested in certain things that boys don't, for the most part, for the masses. And with like girls in STEM, Marissa does a great job with, showing them like the science of fashion, and like some of the techniques that are in there that help draw, girls in to keep them there. And so they see kind of how those topics can apply to areas that they may not have thought had STEM components to them. And so I think that helps keep them in, because your traditional classes are generally around like engineering and computer science and building, and, you know, those are generally topics that boys are mostly interested in, not necessarily girls. I mean, I know when I was younger, and I was interested in, wood and, I would say wood shop, and industrial arts and different things. I remember, being told at one point, like, oh, well, that's dirty. You don't want to be down there like that. Like, don't, you're too pretty. Like, don't do that. And while I loved the comment of being told I was pretty, um, it was an interest of mine that I ended up not exploring, simply because I was told like, oh, you don't want to do that. And so I think that leads to, plus friends will always, especially at the high school age, influence. And that's why developing those friend groups and having those support systems is so necessary to keep girls interested.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I guess I feel by now I just would hope that that's not what they're hearing. Like, you know what I mean? The same stereotypical nonsense. I mean, again, in my generation, like we would never have been encouraged to do anything like wood shop. And I went to Catholic school and our curriculum was so screwy that I couldn't take a typing class because that was considered business and I was honors, which, I mean, I wish I was allowed in it. And literally the nun was like, no, she's not on this track. She's in the honors track. Like, oh my gosh, how messed up is that? But I feel like nowadays with and I think we still have some ways to go, but like with the messages that are out there and with role models, I feel like it's a little bit better, right? For
Oh,
women to see examples. Yeah.
oh, 100%.
Yeah.
It is way better, and there's definitely nowhere near like when I was like a kid, like how I would see, it being portrayed, which is nice. And same thing, the nice thing about the Geisinger Medical College and having students go there, they see like the students in the medical college are who they're working with. So they see kids, that um, Anthony, one of the young guys that are there in the program, who's now applying into his doctorate program, was a Reach High student, so a student who participated in the program. And so that's big for them to see that, he was one of those kids and now he's a doctor and like this is what he's going for. And so definitely making those connections and seeing people, especially people that look like them and talk like them, and, having those connections are huge for the students.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna shift gears a little bit, although I don't want to, I wanted to get as much information about the program as possible. But I wanted to ask you about the future with, and I know I'm asking this question knowing that it's like it could probably be it's a 7-day seminar, but I just want to like kind of encapsulate what you think and how it will impact what you're doing, AI, because I feel like that topic of AI, like, well, what are you asking me about AI? I know it's kind of a really broad kind of topic, but how is that impacting, or is it impacting how you teach now and going forward? And are you concerned about it at all? Like as far as like I don't know, there's just so much around it that we don't understand. At least I don't understand.
Um, so I remember watching, I want to say it was like probably a 60-minute special or something like that around AI. And there was a quote or something in there that said, like, if you're not a little concerned or scared, then you're oblivious. And so um, I think AI, oh God, you're right though. This could be like, I could talk for like days. Um, AI definitely impacts what I do, what the kids do, our everyday lives. I think AI is ingrained in so many things without even realizing how much. And I think there's a lot of dependency, I think, on AI, and that's growing. And so that's something that I was kind of glad to see that the state kind of put out guidelines that AI is now something that kind of has to be taught or talked about in education for students. Because a lot of students just think AI is just, a way to get answers to questions and get essays written and answers to like questions you didn't know on a worksheet. And they don't realize all the ways that AI could be very helpful as far as, I know when I was in graduate school, this past time getting my principalship certification, I used AI to help me gather resources. So I needed to write a paper. I was looking for articles that supported my stance as well as articles that didn't support my stance so I can counter argue my stance. And so just going on the internet and trying myself to find all of those articles was tedious. I don't want to say difficult, but time consuming. And so having an AI system that was able to be like, all right, these are the types of articles I'm looking for. Can you give me, five or six that are most recent that are for and against the argument? And so I think teaching students the ways to use AI to help them, not cheat and plagiarize, but as a way to kind of help them and utilize that as a resource is important. I think you're going to see a lot of effects in the computer science realm. AI can write code. So I think prompting and learning AI prompting as well as troubleshooting and different things around code and text, I think we'll see, I think we've already started seeing massive changes in that. Um, and so I think that's something that like my computer science track really needs to keep an eye on as we continue to write curriculum and building some of that in and, keeping an eye on industry and where they're going with that. Um, but I've also seen movies like I, Robot and Terminator. And so there's always like that, it's a little scary how much AI, it's the AI teaching itself and learning. That is the mind-boggling kind of like, okay, this is great. This is very helpful. This makes my job a lot easier. There's a lot of resources out there now for teachers to help with differentiating worksheets and helping, meet every student's needs. And okay, well, this student's struggling here. Get me, sample problems on how I can adjust, to different aspects of their education. And so there's a lot out there that does a lot of good. It makes teachers' lives a lot easier, helps individualize a lot more for students. It gives them a lot more opportunities. But at the same time, little scary that AI is consistently learning. I remember one of the first few times I used ChatGPT when it first came out. I mean, it was good. It is nothing compared to what it is now. And I think the more that I use it for different things and for research and, for formatting and organizing information, it's learning what I'm looking for. And it's getting, the more that I use it, the better it's getting at seeing like how I like things set up, how I want stuff organized on a page. And that's a little scary.
Yeah, it is. And it's funny when it first came out, I think resistance is futile. I think, what is that? You have to learn something because I was kind of like, oh, and then I listened to somebody who was actually, I don't know if he was a biologist, physicist, whatever the heck he was. He was somebody smart here from Boston University. And he was like, well, I'm sure, every advancement people can tend to be maybe skeptical of, or he's like, would you rather a dishwasher do your dishes than you do them? It was one of those things where it can do things for you that maybe you don't want to spend the time on, or like to your point is tedious. But I think, and I guess it's like a lot of things, it's just that it's really powerful. It's the intent behind it. So if there are people with evil intentions, it can be, used in an evil way. And I forget if I was listening to something, if it was a podcast or whatever, but they made a good point about like how it can be not scary, but like, let's say a lot of different industries are going to start to use it. Like, so let's say if someone qualifies for a loan, if a bank uses it and they're only using the criteria that's given, and people who might be passed over if they're not like, if look like this, fit like this, or even in healthcare. Like, I get a little concerned with healthcare because, is it data going to be making decisions for people? And that stuff is kind of scary, but we can't avoid it. Obviously, we have to, I think we just have to keep an eye on it, I guess is the thing, and learn about it and keep an eye on it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Is it ever a concern? I was just watching a video on it was one of my friends who is still teaches. She's full time at King's, but we joke together about like them being on their phones, and she literally would physically take the phones off them in college. I didn't usually go that far, but she sent me a reel about this teacher about like some of the criticism the teachers get, and she's saying, they're a generation that's getting dopamine hits constantly, and it's challenging to get their attention. Is that ever, I mean, and you're it's I just find it interesting, or I would think it's interesting that you're in the field where it is technology, what you're doing. Is it ever hard? Do you find that difficult, or do you use it to your advantage? Like, okay, they're already looking at their phones, so they're already using the internet, so let's have them use it, but have them use it for an assignment. Or do you run into those kind of challenges too, where they need constant like dopamine hits?
So I think there has to be a balancing act between screen time and the students using the technology and being on the technology as well as being off of it. I do know our district is working with the University of Virginia on a leadership and educations program. And in that program, I participate as one of our district leaders, and we interviewed students as part of that program for another initiative. But one of the things that came out was students actually being tired of being on the computer in the classroom and wanting the actual shutdown of the screen. And so balancing, I see more engagement in students when they're actively involved in like a project or an activity in the classroom that's hands-on and moving about and physically doing something versus, sitting on the computer and working through like a program or an AI adjusted, data source. So while I think the technology is important for them to learn the skills that they need in order to enter the workforce and have the skills that are necessary, that they're going to need to be like, they're going to have to know how to write an email. They're going to have to be able, to, type on a keyboard sufficiently. So like there are parts of technology that are inevitable. However, there's a lot to be said for that critical thinking piece and that grit that comes with hands-on actual physical activity versus, relying on the computer to kind of solve all the problems. And so that is something that I have seen a lot in students is, as adults, we go, oh, well, the kids know it. They know all the technology, like they're ahead of, and like, no, they're not. They're more into like the social media and the networks and like the different things in the games, but the technology itself, like I still have students who, send me their whole email in the subject line. So there's a lot to be said with, the balance between technology and um, I want to say more of a traditional hands-on curriculum
Yeah.
for students.
And I think from what I'm hearing too, and I think you might agree, it probably varies obviously from school district to school district, teacher to teacher, classroom to classroom, because like for the example, you said they still have to learn how to write an email. That was one of my things in college when they wouldn't, and even like etiquette, you know what I mean? Like learning, like you don't just like no subject or no, yeah, nothing in the subject header, or like saying, hey, I mean, I don't need to be called, professor. I would say you can call me Janine, but hey isn't exactly appropriate, or just attaching the document with nothing else around it. Like that sort of stuff should, and I guess this is where even adults are using AI a lot, like, and I that's one of my pet peeves since my degrees in journalism and I like and enjoy writing. I'm just like, oh God, this is, you could tell this message is AI generated.
Right.
But to like, I met with a friend and her husband was like, I'm terrible at writing, so it helps me. And I get that. I totally get that. And I guess the students can learn to use it for that, but they still do need to learn how to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, and my favorite one is not hey, it's yo, bro.
Do you actually get that?
That yep, yep. Yo, bro. Can you update my grades? Like, yeah, yep. Um, that one's great. But there's definitely a need for students to the etiquette, like you had said, is a big one on, kind of what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. Even as far as like passwords and the information that you put out, onto the internet. And a big one with social media is like, you post that photo or you post that picture, or you post like your status and you say something, like it could come back and bite you 10 years down the road. And so a lot of those like social norms and etiquettes and realizing like, the internet doesn't forget. And being cognizant of that is something that definitely is something that should be and should continue to be taught to students and brought up and engaged in and have conversations around, why those things are the way they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something when I was teaching, I had one of my friends, I used to work at Blue Cross for 11 years. I had a gentleman I knew who now is with Geisinger, but he's in HR, to talk to them about how, yes, they will look at your social media presence before they hire you, and why it's good to take a look at it and say, what's out there, and it's like you said, the internet doesn't forget. And I think, again, I'm sure that varies from teacher to teacher, or classroom to classroom, or school district to school district, but I think that's an important lesson for them to learn. It's like, you do have to be aware of your social presence, your profile out there, because it will be looked at. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Is there anything that we didn't cover as far as women in STEM about that you didn't get to say, or anything we didn't cover?
No, we kind of hit all of the main points. You talked a lot about the women in philanthropy, and I got to talk about my girls in STEM and, PJS and the projects and stuff that we do here at the STEM Academy to help support and uplift women. And so that was really it.
Okay.
We got, STEM at Scranton, in the Scranton School District, I think is important. I'm glad that, they felt the need to, start this academy and that they continue to support it and have it available to students. I think that is great. My sister actually lives in Houston, Texas. And so when I go out and visit her and my niece, it's interesting to see a lot of their districts and how they have like the different magnet schools for, STEM and the performing arts and trades and all the different career options that are out there. And I'm glad that our district kind of has started moving, in that direction, at least as far as STEM goes, and giving the kids like the ability to specialize and really focus in on something that they know interests them. I wish
Yeah.
it was around when I was a kid.
Yeah. I mean, I'm encouraged that these types of things, though, to your point, are coming around. And even like you mentioned Hazleton, I think they even have an arts academy too, which I think is
I
fantastic.
believe it just opened last year. I think
Hmm.
was their first year. I think they ran a small pilot of the program, and I believe it just opened last year. Yeah. So,
Yeah. That's encouraging to see that, because, not every kid wants to have the same thing. And I mean, I think it helps them get prepared for the future better.
oh, exactly. And that's something. So in January, I go around to our three middle schools and I give a presentation about STEM. And that's one of the first things I tell them. It's like, listen, some of you are interested in engineering and computer science and gaming and medicine and science and math. And there are others of you that are like, I hate math and I want to be a journalist or I want to be a lawyer or a teacher or any other amazing career that is out there. Like STEM isn't for everybody, but that doesn't mean that what you are interested in is anything less. And so, I also tell them, I was like, when you come to STEM, like you really should be interested because we kind of everything is involved around, engineering, computer science, and medicine. So if you don't like one of those three things, gonna be miserable because that's all that's like we're hyper focused on those things. So like even I notice at lunch, the kids are building stuff with Legos. They're, playing like a game that someone coded. Like they're actively, even in their free time, fully engaged around one of like our kind of topic areas. So
Yeah. So
um
those kids are really in the right place.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much. As you said, I like to kind of go where the conversation, takes us. And I appreciate your time so much, and I appreciate what you're doing. I think it's so great. It sounds like you have a really wonderful program there.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me.
Of course. Yeah, I'm so glad you were there at Women in Philanthropy, because when I saw it, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have to talk to her before she leaves so we can connect." That's great. So thanks
Yes.
again. As I say each week too, if there's anyone out there that, if you yourself would like to be a guest, or if you know a woman that you're like, "Wow, she should be on this podcast. She's got a lot of great things to say." please feel free to reach out to me. I always welcome suggestions. Nina suggested Katana, and I've had many people reach out to me, which I'm always grateful for. If you would like to help support these kinds of conversations, I am always open to gaining new podcast sponsors. And remember that you are also helpful if you just share the podcast with someone, write a review, or rate it as well. That's also very helpful. So, as I say every week, I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of my wine glass.